This way. Good boy. It's time to start preparing the garden for winter. Giving your plants some care and attention now will get them off to a flying start next spring. Carol visits a garden packed with tropical plants and finds out how these exotic specimens are nursed through the very coldest weather.
So are you going to cut it?
Yes.
Oh no, you do it.
And I visit Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens in South Africa, where many of our favourite garden plants originate. And seeing them growing in their natural habitat is the best guide to making them feel at home in our own gardens. Hello. You know, it's really hard on a lovely October's day to put yourself in a winter mindset, but I'm doing that today because there are plants that I want to protect from winter and also make sure that they go into next spring at their very best. Up. Good boy. Now, it's a game. He jumps on the table easily. About a year ago, he jumped up on this table with fuchsias on it, wagged his tail enthusiastically and just swept them all to the floor. And I lost a great chunk of one of the two that we had at the time. Anyway, I salvaged that, made some cuttings, and now a year later I've got 5 extra little plants. But I have to confess, the fuchsias have done really badly this year. It's been very odd for them. They didn't start to flower at all until the end of August, when normally they're finishing by the end of August, and now they're getting going. Not terribly spectacular, but at least they've got some flowers. And just about now is when I'm thinking of bringing them in under cover, because they need protection from the worst of the frost. In fact, an awful lot of things need gathering in now in the garden, particularly in pots, before the weather gets too bad. Because there is that terrible moment when you come down in the morning, everything's white with frost, and you realise you've definitely lost some plants. So, prevention rather than cure. Those are your cuttings. Let's take you to the greenhouse. Come on, you come too. Come on. Go on in. Now what I would really like is a conservatory, so I could enjoy flowers like fuchsias as long as they're at their very best. But I haven't got one, so a greenhouse has to be the next best thing. I do have a heater, because the idea is to keep it above 5 all the time. And the best way to keep it slightly warm, or rather not cold, is to insulate it. And that's what I'm going to do today. And I'm using bubble wrap. It was actually invented, believe it or not, as wallpaper. And then, for reasons hard to fathom, nobody seemed to be using it on their walls. So they thought of using it as insulation for greenhouses, and it genuinely was. That was its first application. And of course, the beauty of bubble wrap, apart from the lovely sound it makes when you pop it, is that it lets light through as well as keeping heat in. Now the idea is to create a pattern, like a clothes pattern. So you put the pieces up in their relevant places each autumn, take them down each spring, store them over summer, and then you just pull them out and reuse them the following year. The secret of this is to get high quality sticky tape, 2-inch sticky tape. If you get cheaper gaffer tape, it'll do the job, but it won't stay stuck. And then you come down on a January morning and find the whole lot has just collapsed in on itself. Now, although this might seem like very elaborate measures to protect plants, we don't grow many tender plants here at Longmeadow. Our winters are either too cold or too wet for many to thrive. However, I know that there are parts of the country where you can grow a much wider range of plants. And Carol has been to Camberwell in South London to visit a garden that relishes in growing as many tropical plants as possible.
I've travelled to bustling South London to meet Clive Pankhurst, who's nurtured his tropical garden for the last 5 years. With the days shortening and cooler weather around the corner, I'm here to see how he maintains his exotic collection through the ravages of winter. Hiya, Clive.
Hi, Carol.
You couldn't be anywhere but in the heart of London, could you?
Yes.
Certainly not from the sound of it.
Oh, building works and planes, yes.
And trains passing by, the lot. But the look of it, you know, I felt like I needed my machete when I came in here. But it looks so wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
It's just so beautiful. But look at these fabulous leaves. Isn't that dramatic?
Oh, it's so pretty, isn't it? It's all from seed sown in the spring.
This is Ricinus communis,
Yes.
yeah? Castor oil plant.
Zanzibar is the other name for it. Zanzibar, yes.
Oh, right. And so beautiful with the solanum, I think.
It's a lovely contrast. This is a kangaroo apple.
Solanum lasts in the autumn, isn't it?
Indeed, yes. Yeah.
So related to tomato.
It's just from seed grown in spring. It's a tender perennial, but when the frosts come, it'll all be down to the ground. I mean, there'll be nothing left. It's about saving the seed and taking some insurance and cuttings. We just kind of treat it as a bedding plant, really.
Yeah, big bedding plant.
Very big bedding plant, yes.
So no chance of protecting it, but you can start it again next year.
Absolutely.
I'm away, I'm away, I'm away, I'm away.
I really feel like I should be wearing a pin helmet.
Absolutely. Well, how about this?
Oh, that is just out of this world, doesn't it? Look so perfectly at home and happy.
I think they have such beautiful leaves and a really kind of jungly kind of feel. It's a very kind of hardy plant. I mean, this came to me from my mother-in-law's neighbours, and they're from Grimsby, and if it can survive in Grimsby, I think it can survive anywhere, really.
You don't get much harder than that, do you?
Well, exactly.
And as a corner piece, it's just perfect, isn't it?
Yeah. I've got lots of other hardy plants too that kind of with that jungle feel, so come on through the undergrowth.
Thank you very much. This is Clerodendron bungii, isn't it?
Yes, what a name, yes.
It's gorgeous, but what a plant! It's spectacular, isn't it?
Oh, and if you see the flowers, beautiful, beautiful flowers as well. I mean,
it's magnificent. And people used to reckon this was tender, but it's perfectly hard, isn't it?
I think if it was very cold, it would just be cut back to the ground, it would come again. But for me, I just tidy it up every year and it's okay.
And what an association with this lovely Arundo dono.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful plant. I think a lot of woodwind instruments get their reeds from here traditionally.
Oh, right.
The ancient Egyptians used to wrap their dead in the leaves.
Really?
And now it's a biofuel. So,
how do you know that? But you're not telling me you leave it out.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, it does really well here, and we don't do any type of protection, and just comes up every year. I mean, we just cut it back to the ground, and then all this is this year.
I mean, I think that's proof positive that it's not only a question of geographic area when it comes to deciding what's tender, what's hardy, but it's also assessing the sort of microclimate within your garden, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
It's just key to understanding your plants.
And it's Clive's deep understanding of his garden that makes it so successful. It's exceptionally well sheltered with its own microclimate, meaning that unlike in most parts of the country, Clive doesn't need to protect the crowns of his tree ferns with straw. But he's taken cuttings from his salvias to make sure that even if a sharp frost wipes out the parent plant, he's got replacements for next year. Now that's what you call a truly tender plant, isn't it?
Yes.
Which banana is it?
It's Musa sycamensis. I grow both Musa sycamensis and bijou, and I find bijou's quite hardy here. Yeah. But the sycamensis we really need to dig out.
Can I give you a hand?
Absolutely. Oh, use your muscle.
I suppose the thing is with anything that's truly tender, you just got to dig it out of the ground.
Oh, absolutely, and just keep it somewhere frost-free.
But then the treatment for this, because it's going to keep some stem, is that you've got to make sure that the stem's protected too, isn't it?
Absolutely, that's the key thing.
So you're going to cut it?
Yes.
Oh no, you do it. It's too much responsibility.
I'm going to give it a hat, just to give it a little bit of extra protection.
You've done this before, haven't you?
Once or twice.
So you'll do exactly the same thing with your musabarju, which is much, much hardier, but it'll stay in the ground.
Absolutely, and we'll probably give it a bit of a wigwam as well, just for a little bit of extra protection.
Because it's got to suffer out there.
It has,
Shiver.
yes.
Yeah. So what shall we do next?
We fleece it.
Right.
Got it
Heavy
in.
enough, isn't it?
Oh, safe now.
Yeah.
Well, having wrapped the greenhouse for winter, these should now be completely snug and probably go on flowering for weeks. I think one of the really interesting points there was that the microclimate of your garden can change dramatically, even just in a few yards. It certainly does here. So if you don't have a greenhouse, it could be just enough to move a plant a few yards to a more sheltered spot, and that will get it through winter. Right, they'll be fine all winter. Now, while we're in the greenhouse, have a look at this. These are the sweet peas that I sowed just last week, and look, they're all coming up, all germinated, so that's a really good start and augurs well for next summer. Now the dahlias are looking really good, and it would be quite wrong to try and take action now to keep them protected over winter. I should enjoy the flowers until the last minute when frost strikes and blackens them. Not least because the tubers will go on growing until that moment. And the bigger the tubers are this autumn, the better the flowers will be next year. So I'll keep these outside until they get frosted. And if that's Christmas time, so be it. However, this canna has nothing left to offer. In fact, it didn't have much to offer all summer. It's been hopeless. It's hated the cold weather. This is Canna Durban, and it should be at least twice the size. It should still be flowering now in October. Poor thing has given up, doesn't like it, wants to go home. And if I dig it up now and get the rhizome out, we can protect it and then give it a better chance next year. So it's a question of just gently easing it out so I don't damage the rhizome. There we go. Up you come. There we are. Now, do you see, it's hardly grown out of the pot it was in, actually. But these are the roots coming off it. So that's a new shoot. That's come up. But that's pretty much all the growth it's done all summer. So let's put that in the wheelbarrow. That goes in there. This rather sorry-looking specimen is, oh, you comb this, the top has come off. And all those seeds can be kept. Do you see in there? Lots and lots of little seeds. So I'm going to put that to one side before we do anything else at all. Pop that down there. Now, that has grown from a bulb. It's a South African plant. They like wet summers. And in fact, our fairly heavy soil has been good for them, even though it's been fairly dry this year. It's a bulb and it needs lifting. Now, if I get in under there, planted it quite deep. There we go. Now you can see it's got a root system coming from it. If I break that up, there's the bulb. There we go. So by lifting it, I'm protecting it from two possible dangers. The first is very cold weather like we had last November and December, and also a wet winter, which we'll hate. Now I've got another South African plant here. This is Galtonia candicans, which is a bulb. And if the drainage is really good and it's not too cold, can happily stay in the ground and come back year after year. It's done really well this summer. Wonderful white flowers, work really well with the hostas. You can see there's one or two little ones still on there, and that's been flowering since July. However, I daren't leave it in the ground here because it's too wet, even if it's not too cold. This is the damp garden. It's been a jolly dry damp garden all summer, but I can't bank on that happening all winter, so that's coming up too. So it's a tiny little bulb when you see the size of the flower. Now, it is as important to store things in the manner to which they're accustomed as it is to grow them. And in the case of cannas, they like to be damp. So it's important not to let them dry out over winter. First thing to do is to cut them back. So cut off the top growth. Shake off all loose soil. And then pack them into spent potting compost, or I use leaf mould. And you can fill a pot with as many different rhizomes as you like, as long as they're all the same variety and you've labelled them clearly. Water them lightly. You don't want them to be wet, but they must just be slightly moist. Put them somewhere cool and dark and check them every month to make sure it's not drying out. In the case of eucomis, you need to do the opposite. Cut off the flower spike and then pot them up into a very free draining compost. Keep them cool and dry. The same goes for Galtonias. Cut off the flower spike, put them in a pot, and then just keep them dry is the key thing. Now, of course, whilst I'm putting these to bed here, in their native South Africa, both the Galtonia and eucomis are just getting going. And I was in South Africa a few weeks ago, and whilst I was there, I went to Kirstenbosch Botanical Garden, specifically to see some plants that I grow here at Longmeadow in their natural environment. Kirstenbosch is in a stunning location, rising high onto the eastern slopes of Table Mountain. It was created nearly 100 years ago to preserve the native flora of South Africa, and especially those from the Cape. It was the first botanic garden in the world dedicated entirely to native plants. So everything here is literally at home. Although there are thousands of species native to South Africa, certainly the most iconic is the protea, or the pincushion. And at this time of year, in their spring, our autumn, you see them on the hillside of the fynbos, which is the mountain scrub. And some of them have the most amazing way of reproducing themselves. They produce big seeds like Smarties with a coating. And that coating is irresistible to one ant that lives on the fynbos. So it takes the seed and takes it back down underground to its nest where it eats it and then leaves the seed itself. And there the seed waits, sometimes for up to 10 years until the next big fire. And the fire triggers germination. So you have this incredible, delicate interweaving between every single element of the ecosystem, which results in this stupendous flower. Now, we can't grow proteas in our own garden, but there are a couple of plants I want to show you that we can and do grow. But the result is very different to here in their natural habitat. The first is this. It's called Leonotis leonoris. And I grow it in my garden as an annual for these gorgeous orange flowers. And I plant it as a seed in April, put it out in the garden in June, July, and by August it's 6-8 foot tall with a massive flower and not many leaves. Then the first frost kills it stone dead, and we start again next year from seed. Here, it's a woody shrub. This is just one fairly small plant, completely different to that precious plant that I nurture back at home. This is a plant that will be familiar to lots of UK gardeners for its leaves. It's called Melianthus major. But I bet not many people in the UK will have a plant that will throw up so many of these flower spikes. And of course, when you see it at home like this, you realise that what we're growing is a shadow of what it could be.
The climate of the Cape, and especially the extra heat, are the key to these plants growing so differently. Summer is long, hot and very dry, and winter short, mild and reliably rainy. The weather in their brief spring is variable, but can often still be wet, and it's this extra moisture that helps to produce the amazing displays of colour.
Now, the main reason that I came to Cape Town at this time of year is so I could catch the incredible spring flowers. They don't last very long here. And these behind me, Octotus, Acinia, Senecio, come from the desert. And they only flower when it rains, which can be every few years. Now, here at Kirstenbosch, they do water regularly, so therefore they flower regularly. And back at home, we can grow them, but it's worth remembering where they come from. They need really good drainage, think of the desert, and maximum sunshine.
Perhaps the most familiar of all South African plants are pelargoniums. Whilst we grow a wide range here in Britain, at Kirstenbosch they have the parents of our commercial varieties, and these grow quite differently in their native environment.
It is extraordinary to see just how exuberant these pelargoniums can be. This is a scented leaf variety. And it is positively romping like an overgrown shrub through this border. And it just shows you that what they relish is heat. We mollycoddle ours and we nurse them and we grow them in pots and we get huge pleasure from them. But they're always struggling, really. And perhaps the lesson we can learn from this is to get the very best from our pelargoniums. We should grow them in conservatories or greenhouses if we've got them. This is fruticosum, which is creating these elegant billowy mounds around the stone, rather like heather, and throwing up delicate flowers floating above very, very finely cut leaves. And seeing it like this makes me, first of all, just want to have it at home. I'd love to have this growing in a pot. Now, it won't look like this. I can't possibly create this effect, but in a pot, I can get the essence of what I'm seeing here at Kirstenbosch. These are not the same pelargonium. This is actually a scented leaf type called Old Spice, but this summer, pelargoniums haven't done very well. It's just been too cold. In fact, they're growing better now than they have done right through July and August and September. But they're coming to the end of their time because I need to get them under cover before it gets too cold. I'll probably leave these out for a little bit longer and risk it. But I'll take one in, and before I protect it, I'll take some cuttings. That way I've got insurance. I know that even if there's a radically hard frost overnight, I've still got the plant and some offspring for next year. The great thing about pelargoniums is they take really easily from cuttings, so you can afford to be quite cavalier about it. However, there is one tip you do need to observe. If you cut between a leaf and the stem, the chances of it rooting are much, much less than if you get in here. So if you see, these are breaking off from its stem. So if I cut in under there, I've then potentially got about half a dozen cuttings from it. But you needn't worry. You know this is going to work more or less, so that you don't have to be too anxious about the process. So I'll just get in there, do a cut. There we go. Right, put that to one side. And here we have the basis for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cuttings. And we can take it from there. Now I could either cut those with a sharp knife, but actually what works just as well is to break them off. Just pull them off like that, and you get a tiny heel. We've got a little bit of the stem there, and that tends to aid rooting with any plant. Now I've got a mixture here for cuttings. This is my normal potting mix, which has got some grit in it, but extra grit. Mix it up so it's really, really well drained, and they'll root much easier as a result. So mix that up like that. I need a dibber, and then down the edge of the pot, and they will root the better as a result. And you can take these anytime from spring right through till now. And I shall certainly take some more cuttings from these pelargoniums I keep in the greenhouse next April, May, as they start to grow. And that way we'll build up, and you just have this wonderful abundance. Right, that's a little job done. And here are a few other jobs that you can do this weekend. Mediterranean plants hate sitting in cold, wet soil over winter. So improve their drainage by raising containers up on chunks. This will also save the pot as well, because in really cold weather, the soil will freeze, expand, and break the pot.
Oh, mess around. Don't mess around.
Given sufficient heat, chilies will go on growing successfully into the new year. But harvest ripe fruit when they're ready. Otherwise, they will inhibit the production of fresh flowers. And then when you've picked them, you can either eat them fresh or dry them to store them for future consumption. If you need an example of how odd a growing year it is, you could hardly do better than this pumpkin. Here we have a completely voluptuous flower with a fruit forming behind it, and we're the middle of October. It should look like this at the beginning of August, but because it was so cold, they've really done badly. However, the tripods have been a good thing. I'll do this again. Growing squashes and pumpkins up a tripod is a good way to grow them if you're short of space. However, if I leave that, that's never going to form a ripe fruit. It's too late in the year. So I'm just going to harvest what I have managed to grow and then ripen them off, so at least I can store and eat the meagre bounty of my pumpkin harvest. When you harvest them, leave a stem, because they will store much better with the stem on. The best plan is to put them in some sunshine so the skins can thicken, and that way they'll store better. Well, there's no question, this is the most miserable pumpkin harvest I've ever had. Never mind, win some, lose some. Anyway, there's always next year. And there's next week, when I'll be back here at 8 o'clock. So join me then. Bye-bye.